Good. Now you can finally afford to pay me what I'm owed. She said it loud enough for the waiter to flinch. Her wine glass hovered midair as she let out a breathy little laugh, like she'd been waiting years to drop that line. Her sister joined in, smirking over her creme brulee. Even her mother chuckled into her napkin, careful not to smear her lipstick. And across the table, her father, the great Thomas Faulkner himself, didn't laugh, but the smug tightening around his jaw said he approved. That's what stung more than anything. Not that she said it, but that he agreed. I smiled. Didn't flinch. Didn't argue. Didn't rise to the bait. I lifted my glass and toasted the table with a simple, to new beginnings, like I hadn't just been publicly castrated over duck confit. But inside, something locked into place. Not rage. Not pain. Just clarity. That calm, almost clinical realization a surgeon gets before the first incision. I had the contract in my briefcase. It was already signed on my end, notarized and clean. The buyer's offer had come through 2 weeks prior, well above market, no contingencies, and most importantly, irrevocable. All I had to do was finish dessert, shake a few more hands, and file the transfer. The clock had already started ticking. I'd spent years sitting at that table, supporting them, smiling at their fundraisers, playing the charming background husband while they paraded around like royalty. I was the tech guy, the software nerd, the cute project she married for stability after her art degree stopped paying the bills. And now that stability was no longer convenient, she was ready to cash out. She never asked who I was selling to. Not once. Which made it even sweeter. And by the way, while you're here, if you're the kind of man who's ever been laughed at and kept receipts instead of shouting, do me a favor. Hit that follow button. 97% of you are listening without subscribing. You've got no idea how much it helps the team when you do. Keep stories like this alive, and revenge? Well, revenge is best served regularly. Anyway, later that night, I was alone in my home office, the one she used to call the man cave, with air quotes. The one she once suggested converting into a yoga studio because we need more natural light and fewer darkwood vibes. I clicked send on the final signature packet to the buyer's attorneys. No party, no announcement, just a soft chime and a new calendar reminder. Scheduled transfer of IP documentation to legal. Then I poured myself a glass of Glendronach 18 and opened the file drawer where I'd stored every quarterly report for the last 7 years. I didn't look at the numbers. I knew them by heart. I was just holding them, letting my fingers feel the weight of what I'd built, silently, while being told I was cute for playing CEO. They never asked what the company really did. Not in detail. They saw flashy logos, the occasional news mention, and assumed I was still tinkering with apps. No one in that family read the SEC filings. No one understood that my client list had grown beyond boutique retailers and now included half the logistics infrastructure of the Western Seaboard. And they definitely didn't know that one of those clients, quietly introduced 6 months ago, was the holding group owned by Richard Langston. A name Thomas Faulkner knew intimately. A name that hadn't crossed his desk in over a decade, ever since the Langston merger debacle nearly tanked his own company. It wasn't just personal. It was structural. Langston wasn't buying my company for glory. He was buying it because it held the one software suite that Faulkner Industries depended on to handle their freight analytics. You know, the one I personally helped optimize while my wife told her friends I was still debugging things, or whatever. And the kicker? The sale included a licensing clause so elegantly worded, Faulkner's team wouldn't even notice it until they were in breach. But that part, we'll get to soon enough. For now, I finished my drink and looked around the office. The walls were still covered with her modernist paintings. The bookshelf still had her mother's gifted biographies of failed Silicon Valley founders. I made a note to box everything tomorrow. The timer had started, and she'd started it, with a laugh. It was raining. The kind of soft, deliberate rain that muffles footsteps and makes the world feel smaller, more private. Perfect weather for ghosts and chess moves. The office park was empty by design. Not one of those glass monoliths downtown, but a low, brick-and-metal complex on the edge of the industrial district, where NDAs come stapled in triplicate and deals get inked behind locked steel doors. Langston was already waiting inside. He didn't rise when I entered, just glanced up, nodded, and motioned toward the chair across from him. The man looked like time had tried to ruin him and failed. Still sharp, still mean, still nursing a vendetta that spanned 2 presidential administrations. His company, what remained of it, was lean, vicious, and ready, like a wolf that hadn't eaten in days. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked, tapping the folder between us. "No press," I said. "No leaks. Not until you've got the IP and I'm legally out." Langston's smile was a slow, creeping thing. "I'm not the one who needs to worry about leaks. But fine. No announcements. We stay in the shadows until the dominoes fall." He slid the contract over. I'd already seen it, of course. My lawyers had spent weeks crafting the transfer language with almost psychotic attention to detail. The core of it wasn't even the sale price, though it was considerable. It was the clause buried in Section 14.2.3, Software Licensure and Restrictive Entity List. That clause was the scalpel, the shiv behind the handshake. It named, explicitly, a list of parties that would be permanently barred from accessing or implementing the software package in any form. Not just the core product, but the framework, the modules, the infrastructure, the code itself. And at the top of that list, Faulkner Industries. Why? Because 10 years ago, Faulkner pushed Langston out of a merger, bribed a board, blackballed the man from half the tech circles in the Northeast. Langston spent the next decade bleeding slowly. Until now. Now he had the knife. "You'll be out of it completely?" Langston asked, flipping through the final pages. "Gone by COB today. New execs take over Monday. The transition doc is in your inbox. Clean exit. Nothing traceable to me after." "And the divorce?" "Filed yesterday." Langston chuckled, signing with a black Mont Blanc. "Goddamn. Remind me never to cross you." I didn't answer. Just signed my own page. When we stood, he extended a hand. "Pleasure doing business with you." I shook it. "Likewise. Just be ready. You'll have about 24 hours of silence before it hits them." He tilted his head. "Think she knows?" "No," I said, walking to the door. "She never asked what I did for a living. Just assumed." There was something profoundly satisfying about that silence as I left. No celebration. No applause. Just quiet efficiency. A strategic vacuum where something big used to be. By the time I got back in my car, my phone had already pinged. Transfer confirmed. IP logged. Access permissions revoked. They'd realize it soon enough. When Faulkner's servers tried to ping our API and got the digital equivalent of a slammed door. When their internal dashboards failed to load. When the custom logistics engine, their entire warehousing system, depended on returned a 403 error code. 24 hours. That's all it would take. 24 hours until the empire started to buckle. And no one, not her father, not their smug little board of directors, had any clue they were already sinking. The manila envelope made a satisfying thump when I dropped it on the clerk's counter. No tears, no hesitation, no second-guessing. Just signatures and silence. The divorce filing was clinical, deliberately so. Nothing messy, nothing emotional. No accusations, no timelines. Just irreconcilable differences. The difference being, I had a plan, and she had a punchline. By 3:40 p.m., the paperwork was in the system. By 4 o'clock, I was home, watching her hold court on the patio with 2 of her friends. Those designer-wrapped hyenas who only show up when there's fresh blood in the water. They sipped overpriced Pinot and talked like I wasn't 30 feet away inside the house, hearing every word through the open windows. "I mean, can you believe he finally sold it?" she said, stretching the vowels like she was doing vocal warm-ups. All those late nights in his little nerd cave finally paid off. And just in time, too, because I am done playing supportive wife. They all laughed. One of them said something about upgrade season. Another joked about how she'd better get a beach house out of it, minimum. And my wife, the woman I once built a future with, just smirked and raised her glass. To generous exits. I didn't interrupt. I just made a mental note to change the Wi-Fi password. A small pleasure. At 6:15 p.m., her lawyer emailed me the standard asset disclosure request. It read like a grocery list. Real estate holdings, liquid cash, investments, stock options, and, of course, business interests. I replied an hour later. PDF attached. Signed. Notarized. All clean. It took less than 5 minutes for the read receipt to ping back. That's when the real fun began. Because everything was there. Every account, every asset, every valuation down to the decimal. Except one. The company. It wasn't omitted. It wasn't hidden. It simply wasn't mine anymore. Sold. Transferred. Gone. Legally, irrevocably, indisputably, not mine. It was like watching someone jump into a pool without realizing the deep end had been drained. She must have assumed the sale meant money pouring in, alimony gold. The timing was too perfect, right? She probably imagined me swimming in cash, counting zeros, planning guilt-fueled settlements to make her disappear quietly. Instead, all she got was a quiet accountant's note at the bottom of the document. No current business holdings as of date of filing. I heard her reaction before I saw it. The front door slammed. High heels clicked across the hardwood. She appeared in the doorway of my office, arms crossed, jaw tight. You filed? She snapped, like she wasn't sure if she was mad or impressed. Yes. She glanced at the desk. And the disclosure? Send it to your lawyer. Should have it by now. She squinted, calculating. So that's it. You just sell the company and file for divorce like you're unsubscribing from a newsletter? I didn't respond. Just returned her gaze, calm. What did you get for it? She asked, voice clipped. Enough. Her lip curled. Don't be smug. I didn't smile. Didn't blink. Wouldn't dream of it. She stormed out 5 seconds later. 5 minutes after that, I got a follow-up email from her lawyer. This one didn't sound so professional. The tone had changed. It was the kind of email you send when the numbers don't make sense. When the math doesn't add up. When you realize the one asset you were banking your entire divorce strategy on just evaporated. Because here's the thing about leverage. If you reach for it too early, you might find the handle missing. She thought she was divorcing a man drowning in sudden wealth. What she was really facing was someone who'd already cashed out, strategically, silently, with nothing left for her to skim. She'd filed for blood and found dust. Her phone rang during brunch. She almost didn't answer. She was mid-story, laughing over avocado toast with her Pilates instructor and a friend from college she hadn't spoken to since 2011, but suddenly reconnected with the moment she filed the divorce. The name on the screen stopped her cold. CFO, Faulkner Group. She excused herself with a dramatic eye roll and a sip of her mimosa, pretending the call was just another nuisance from the corporate circus. Hey, I'm out right now, she answered, already checking her reflection in the mirrored wall. Can this wait? No, it really can't, came the clipped voice on the other end. We've just received a cease and desist from Langston Holdings. She paused, the smile cracking. Langston? That can't be right. We haven't had anything to do with. It's not a mistake. It's targeted. Their legal team is asserting IP control over the logistics suite we've been using for the last 4 years. Effective immediately. They're threatening litigation if we don't pull all active code off production servers within 72 hours. The words bounced off her like hail. What the hell are you talking about? That software's ours. We have a license. We had a license, the CFO corrected. It was through your husband's company. Or ex-husband, I guess. Which, by the way, would have been nice to know before all this blew up. She felt a cold pit start forming in her stomach. Wait, are you saying he sold it to Langston? There was silence on the other end. Then a second voice came on. Deeper, slower, and absolutely livid. Her father. You let him do this? He said. No greeting, no preamble. What do you mean, I let him? Don't play dumb with me, Madison. You knew he was selling. You told us over dinner. You said you were finally getting rid of him and collecting the payout. I didn't know who he was selling to, she snapped. Why didn't you ask? There it was. The question she had no answer for. Because she hadn't. Because it never even crossed her mind. Because she assumed the man who ate in silence at their table, who they all mocked for years, wasn't capable of anything this calculated. Because to her, he was just him. Passive. Predictable. Pathetic. I thought it was just some investor group, she said weakly. You thought, her father echoed, bitterly. Well, now we're all paying for your thinking. He hung up. She stood frozen on the curb outside the restaurant. Brunch forgotten, watching city buses hiss by like the world hadn't just tilted. She barely noticed the second call buzzing in her hand until the screen lit up with her lawyer's name. She answered, and this time, the voice wasn't composed. Jesus Christ, Madison, did you even read the contract? What are you talking about? She barked. What contract? The sale contract, her lawyer hissed. Langston filed their ownership paperwork. We requested a copy. Section 14 is a nuclear warhead. It locks your family's firm out of everything. Not just the software. The data streams, the back-end architecture, the auto-scaling framework. It's all off limits. Permanently. Her knees went weak. He can't do that. He did. He was never even that smart. Well, apparently he was. Because the way this thing is worded, your father's company is legally classified as a restricted entity. You're listed by name in the exclusion clause, Madison. By name. Do you understand what that means? No. No. This has to be illegal. It's not. It's clean. Surgical. And you just served your own head on a silver platter. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Just static. Background noise. Her friend waving from inside the restaurant, mouthing something like, "What's going on?" She didn't wave back. Instead, she turned slowly and stared down at her phone, as if it had betrayed her. As if it, too, had known this was coming and said nothing. And somewhere, probably sipping scotch, he was sitting in silence, knowing this was the hour it would all start to fall apart. Not with a bang, but with a phone call. The boardroom smelled like sweat and cologne and panic. The mahogany table, normally a theater for calm quarterly rituals, looked like a war bunker. Half a dozen board members sat hunched over printed pages, redlining paragraphs that no longer mattered. The projector blinked uselessly behind them, mid-slide on an abandoned PowerPoint presentation. No one was presenting now. Everyone was reacting. Late. At the head of the table, Thomas Faulkner stared at the copy of the sale agreement like it was a forged obituary with his name on it. Section 14.2.3, Software Licensure and Restricted Entity Access. It was there in cold black print, buried halfway through the document. A clearly defined list of prohibited organizations, shell companies, subsidiaries, and individuals permanently excluded from licensing or utilizing the proprietary tech stack. His name, not the company. His personal name. Jesus Christ, someone finally whispered. He listed you by name. Another muttered, as if saying it softer would dull the blow. I want our legal team in here now, Faulkner snapped. They've already read it, the CFO said grimly. 3 different firms reviewed the language. It holds. What about backdoor access? We built half our logistics interface on. It's not just blocked, the CIO cut in. It's self-terminating. The new owner activated a security protocol that force disables unauthorized usage across the stack. We were running it yesterday. We're already out of compliance. Every line of code that talks to that system is now a liability. Faulkner's knuckles went white around his pen. So what we rebuild? We start from scratch. Not in under 6 months. Not without tanking every SLA we've signed. And not with the debt we're already carrying, said the CFO. This buries us. The room fell into a long, taut silence. And then the COO, who'd been unusually quiet all morning, spoke up. You know what the worst part is? She said flatly. He was in this room 2 years ago. Right there. Sitting in that chair. Asking for R&D funding. Asking to pilot our freight routing optimization. And you? She looked at Faulkner. Laughed. You called him a toy builder. Said we don't bankroll pet projects from sons-in-law. The room didn't move. He built the system, she said again. We gave him all the data. Trusted him to scale it. And while we were mocking him, he was making us dependent. Stock alerts started chiming like fire alarms on the phones around the room. Faulkner Industries, minus 12.6%. Downgrade warning issued by Fitch Ratings. JP Morgan reevaluating credit facility. Faulkner was still staring at the document. There has to be a workaround, he said hoarsely. There isn't, the general counsel finally spoke. This wasn't revenge. This was precision. It's not just that we can't access the software. It's that Langston can. That's what makes it devastating. He's not blocking us out of spite. He's replacing us. Langston doesn't have our infrastructure, Faulkner muttered. No, but he has our pipeline. And the client list you poached from him a decade ago? It just started calling back. Someone's phone rang again. They didn't answer. Across the table, one of the junior board members who'd been suspiciously quiet all week pulled out his laptop and silently began updating his LinkedIn profile. Where's Madison? Faulkner suddenly snapped. No one answered. Where is she? He roared, standing now, the contract crumpling in his fist. But Madison wasn't in the building. She hadn't shown up to the emergency meeting. She hadn't answered any of the 5 calls from his assistant. And she hadn't returned the email marked urgent, IP transfer crisis from the night before. Because she was still sitting in her car, parked in front of her lawyer's office, staring at her phone and trying to stop her hand from shaking. She had read the clause. She had seen her name, and it was the first time in her life she truly understood what it meant to be excluded, not from a party, not from a table, not from a marriage, but from an entire empire that used to orbit around her. Inside the boardroom, Faulkner's empire was unraveling fast. And outside, the man who once asked to be taken seriously was sipping coffee on his balcony, watching the sun rise through a quiet smile, knowing that this wasn't just a blow. It was extinction. The estate was quiet in that deceptive, manicured way, where every hedge is trimmed, every brick power washed, and yet you can feel the tension in the air like ozone before lightning. Madison pulled up the gravel drive faster than she should have. The stones crunched beneath the tires like they were warning her to turn around. Inside, the living room was already a war zone. No raised voices, yet, but the energy was unmistakable. Her father was pacing like a lion in a shrinking cage. Her mother stood near the fireplace, stiff, arms crossed, eyes locked on the mantel like it was keeping her upright. A few cousins had arrived early, including Eli, the one they usually ignored because he talked too much and drank too little. Today, he was the only one seated, watching the family unravel with eerie calm. She barely got 2 steps into the room before her father snapped. "Do you even understand what you've done?" She bristled. "What I've done? You married him. You vouched for him. You paraded him into board meetings. Called him brilliant when we said he was boring. Told me to give him access to our warehouse data. You sold him to us. I didn't know he was planning this," she fired back, eyes wide. "Do you think I wanted this to happen? You should have known." Her mother cut in coldly, not even looking at her. "You lived with him, slept beside him, for years, and you didn't see this coming?" "I didn't see you coming either," Madison shot back, voice cracking. "None of you ever respected him. Ever. You dismissed him every chance you got. And maybe we should have kept doing that," her father barked, "instead of letting him get close enough to put a knife in our back." "Jesus, Dad, he didn't stab anyone." "Oh really?" He laughed bitterly. "You think this isn't blood? You think those layoffs we're announcing next week won't have names on them? You think losing our top 5 clients overnight isn't a massacre? You don't understand what he did because you've never built anything worth losing." That's when Eli spoke. Calm, deadly, almost bored. He used to ask for a seat at the table. Everyone turned. "He asked me once," Eli continued. "Pulled me aside after dinner at the holiday party. Said, 'I've been building something that could help. Could scale with your distribution. Maybe it's worth a conversation.' I told him to talk to your father." Her father scoffed. "So?" "He said your father told him the only seat he belonged in was at the kids' table." A silence dropped like a guillotine. "I thought he was harmless," Madison muttered, as if the words might reverse time. "I thought he was safe." "No." Her father spat, walking right up to her. "You thought he was beneath you. All of us did. And now look where that got us." Suddenly it wasn't just shouting, it was everyone shouting. Cousins blaming cousins. The COO's wife blaming her for not sensing the shift. Her mother whisper yelling about reputation damage. One uncle demanding to know how the hell Langston got so much of their data. No one listened. Everyone pointed. And Madison stood dead in the center of the collapse, unsure whether to scream or vanish. The worst part? She still hadn't cried. Not when the legal documents came. Not when her lawyer turned cold. Not when the cease and desist shut down her father's production line. But standing there, being dissected by her own blood, she realized she didn't feel like a daughter anymore. She felt like a saboteur who hadn't even known she was carrying the bomb. And worse, part of her still wanted to defend him. Not because she loved him, that was long dead, but because somewhere, buried under all the contempt and cocktail hour insults, a quiet part of her respected him now. She looked at her father, veins in his neck pulsing, hands clenched into fists, and remembered the first time she brought her husband home. How this house looked down on him before he even opened his mouth. He didn't destroy them out of hatred. He destroyed them out of memory. And those memories? They were theirs. It dropped at 7:42 a.m. sharp. Front page of the finance and strategy section, right between the global markets update and a piece on renewable energy subsidies. A crisp, brutal headline in clean serif font. Disruption by design. How a quiet exit toppled a dynasty. The article was surgical. No fluff, no speculation, just a methodical dissection of a strategic masterstroke. It framed him not as a jilted husband or a bitter tech nerd, but as a visionary who'd played chess while the rest of them tossed hors d'oeuvres across boardroom tables. The writer traced the timeline like a crime scene reconstruction. From the initial software architecture that Faulkner's firm integrated, to the clause-laden sale to Langston, to the cascading failure of legacy systems now triggering mass layoffs across the Faulkner portfolio. And then, halfway through, a quote in bold. "He gave me exactly what I needed," Langston said when reached for comment. "And her family gave me the motivation." That line alone detonated 1,000 unread group chats. By 8:03 a.m., it was trending on LinkedIn. By 8:17, someone had screen capped it and posted it to a gossip subthread with the caption, "Wait, is this the Faulkners? Like, Madison Faulkner?" She hadn't even made it out of bed when her phone started buzzing. At first, she thought it was just more fallout from the board. But the texts were from friends. Personal friends. Serena. "Wait, is that about your ex? WTF? Danielle. Yoga circle. Girl, just read the article. Are you okay? Alicia. Wedding friend. Why didn't you tell me he was that guy? We were talking about this in class." Unfamiliar number. "Hey Madison, this is Lisa from Birch Grove Prep. I was wondering if you'd be willing to speak at our entrepreneurship panel next month, but after today's article." That last one stung more than she expected. She opened Instagram. 3 tagged photos gone. 2 friend counts down. Someone had removed her from a private networking group she co-founded last year. No explanation. She looked at her inbox. 42 unread emails. Subject lines full of polite fire. Clarification request, strategic reassessment, event postponement. Your comments on the Langston deal? She threw the phone across the bed and stared at the ceiling. The problem wasn't that he won. The problem was that he looked cool doing it. Not petty. Not angry. Not vindictive. Brilliant. Calculated. Admired. Worse, envied. The article didn't just praise his exit. It contrasted it with her family's arrogance, their generational complacency, their failure to recognize talent in their own dining room. One section even pulled a quote from an old Faulkner press release, where her father dismissed Langston Holdings as a relic of a less agile era. Now that relic owned their spine. The article ended with a quiet observation. In a world of loud exits and scandalized buyouts, sometimes the most devastating move is the one no one notices, until it's too late. She didn't go outside that day, didn't answer texts, didn't return calls, because the humiliation wasn't behind closed doors anymore. It wasn't confined to her family's estate or boardroom shouts. It was public now, digital, permanent, indexed by Google, screenshot by acquaintances who never liked her but always smiled through brunch. He didn't need to speak. The world was doing it for him. And she was just the footnote. The former wife. The girl who married a chess player and tried to play checkers. Now every room she entered would carry that shadow. She's the one who laughed at him. The office smelled like printer ink and desperation. She slammed the door so hard it rattled the blinds. Her lawyer, Martin Greeley, high-priced and high-strung, barely looked up from the stack of folders on his desk. He'd aged 10 years in the past week. His tie was loose. His eyes were bloodshot. His patience gone. "We need to reverse the sale," she barked. "No. Then we freeze the assets. File an injunction. I don't care what it takes. Do something." Martin closed the folder he was reading and finally met her glare. "Madison, you don't get it. There are no assets to freeze. The sale is done. Finalized. Payment disbursed. Ownership transferred. There's nothing left to grab." She paced the room like a cornered animal. "He hid it. He had to. That money is mine, Martin. He sold our company during the marriage. That should count." He sighed, tapped a document on the desk. "Let's talk about that. See this line? Proceeds from the sale of marital business assets are subject to disclosure at the time of dissolution unless ownership has already transferred. You know what that means?" She didn't answer. "It means if he sold it before filing, it's not marital anymore." And he did. He sold it. And then he filed, clean as a surgeon's blade. "Then the prenup," she started. "Doesn't cover post-divestment proceeds," he interrupted. "I helped write that prenup, remember? You were the one who insisted we exclude anything sold before filing, so you could protect your art royalties in case you needed to liquidate." She stared at him like he'd stabbed her. "You're saying I did this to myself?" "I'm saying he played the long game. And you handed him the timer." She gripped the back of a chair, white-knuckled. "Then go after Langston. We can challenge the sale. It was malicious. He did this just to hurt me. Langston is well within his rights. And if you go after him, You'll trigger counter litigation so fast you'll think your phone's on fire. Madison, this wasn't spite. This was war. And your side surrendered before you knew the battle started. Her voice cracked. So I get nothing? Martin hesitated. Spousal support. Minimal. But even that's tied to the non-contestation clause. If you challenge the terms, you walk away empty-handed. Her face contorted. He can't do this. He already did. She grabbed the prenup from the desk and flung it against the wall. He was nobody when I married him. No money, no status. And now he's the reason your father's firm is hemorrhaging clients, and your name is trending under corporate failures of the decade. She went silent. Martin leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. Look, Madison, the truth? You underestimated a man who spent years being underestimated. You mocked him, ignored him, blocked him from every seat at the table. And while you were hosting wine nights and teasing him about his startup, he was building a trap with silk gloves. She sank into the chair, suddenly exhausted. I thought he was boring. Well, he said quietly, he sure as hell isn't boring now. She stared at the desk. Papers, clauses, signatures, every one of them spelling out her irrelevance in ink. No leverage. No path back. No weapon to swing. All she had was a small monthly payment tied to her silence. And even that could disappear if she tried to strike back. Martin finally slid a final sheet across the table. Your choice, he said. Sign and accept. Or fight and lose. She didn't pick it up. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Because now, even her lawyer had joined the long list of things she thought she controlled, only to find out she never did. The cafe was sterile. Neutral. One of those places with white tile floors, too many succulents, and a menu written in minimalist font. He chose it for that reason. No memories. No emotional undertow. Just somewhere plain, somewhere blank. She arrived 5 minutes late, looking nothing like the woman who used to hold court at charity galas and lecture sommeliers on tasting notes. Her makeup was flawless, of course, but her hands betrayed her. Trembling, clutching her purse like it might float if everything else sank. He didn't stand when she approached. Didn't offer a greeting. She slid into the seat across from him and exhaled like she'd been underwater. I'm not here to fight, she said quickly. I know. I'm not here to ask for money, either. I'm not that stupid. He nodded. That's new. She winced. Please, just, don't be cruel. He folded his hands on the table. You asked to see me. What do you want? I just want to understand. Her voice cracked, barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. You didn't have to go this far. He tilted his head slightly. Didn't I? She leaned in. You could have left. Sold the company. Filed the papers. Walked away. Clean. Quiet. I wouldn't have stopped you. You wouldn't have noticed. She blinked. What? You wouldn't have noticed, he repeated. You would have toasted the sale with your friends. Mocked the prenup. Told everyone I got lucky. And then your father would have poached the software back through some backdoor deal. And I'd be the footnote. That's not. Yes, it is. He opened his laptop. One click. The screen lit up with a simple Excel file. No flourishes. No drama. Just rows and columns and a story. First tab. Faulkner Group. Q4 projections, pre-sale. Healthy revenue. Stable margins. Growth outlook, moderate. Second tab. Faulkner Group. Q1 reality, post-sale. Red. Everywhere. Licensing costs, breach fees, terminated contracts. Forecast. Accelerated decline. And then the third tab. A single white slide with 5 words. Bolded, centered. Respect isn't owed. It's earned. She stared at it. Swallowed. I didn't mean to ruin you, she whispered. I just didn't think I mattered. Silence. I should have listened more, she said. Should have defended you. I didn't know they treated you like that. He closed the laptop. I did. You made me irrelevant, she said, voice raw now. Not just in court. In everything. My friends won't even return my calls. I didn't do that, he said calmly. You did. She broke then, not dramatically, not loudly, just cracked. Like porcelain under a slow twist. Shoulders curled in. Eyes fixed on a coaster. Mouth trembling without words. But he was already standing. He slid the laptop into his bag, adjusted his coat, and looked at her one last time. I don't hate you, Madison. That would mean I still cared. Her head snapped up. But I do remember, he added. And I'm not the only one. He walked out before she could respond. Left her there with a half-drunk latte and a line of regrets she'd never be able to cross back over. She stayed in that chair for almost an hour. People came and went. Tables turned. Baristas swapped shifts. No one recognized her. And for the first time in her life, that mattered. The courtroom was clinical, marble floors, hollow echoes, and the suffocating stillness of a funeral without flowers. Faulkner's bankruptcy hearing didn't make headlines that day, not yet. But the whispers were already out there. Investors were fleeing. Partners were distancing. And now, finally, it was official. The empire had fallen. Madison sat 2 rows behind her father, close enough to smell the starch in his collar, far enough that he didn't have to acknowledge her. He hadn't said a word to her since the estate. Not when the board was dissolved. Not when her mother moved into the guest house. Not even when the charity foundation shut down quietly one Tuesday morning with a single press release. The judge, dry-voiced and unsympathetic, rattled through the opening procedure. This court recognizes the voluntary bankruptcy filing for Faulkner Group Holdings. We'll begin with asset documentation and cause assessment. The opposing counsel stood, calm, almost amused. We'd like to submit Exhibit A, Your Honor, a copy of the sale agreement dated 6 weeks prior to the dissolution. A bailiff handed the judge a sleek, stapled folder. Madison leaned forward slightly, trying to see, but she didn't need to. She knew what it was. The judge flipped through the pages, lips moving silently, then paused. According to this, the software platform, formerly under Faulkner's integration, is now exclusively owned by Langston Holdings? Yes, Your Honor. The judge raised an eyebrow. And this clause here names Thomas Faulkner and associated entities as restricted licensees? That's correct. The judge looked up, expression unreadable. So you handed your core infrastructure to your primary competitor, and then locked yourself out. Madison didn't blink, because there, under the paragraph, were 2 names. His signature, and Langston's. Clean, crisp, irrevocable. The very moment it all shifted was traceable to one exact timestamp. And there it was, etched in ink, cataloged in court, now part of public record. She remembered the night she toasted her divorce with rose and laughter. The night she leaned across the table and joked to her friend, "At least I'll finally get something out of this." And now, she watched her father nod stiffly, accepting the judge's words with the grace of a man whose kingdom had been burned down by someone he never even bothered to learn the birthday of. He never turned around. Not once. Not to her. Not to the board members behind them. Not even when the court recessed and people stood up, unsure if they should whisper condolences or avoid eye contact altogether. She stepped out into the hallway, her heels clicking in the silence, her throat dry. That's when her phone buzzed. One message. No subject. Just the sender, his name. She opened it. "Alimony's affordable now. How's your end of the deal?" No emoji. No punctuation games. Just that quiet line. And she stood there, gripping her phone like it might shatter. Because in the end, he didn't need to destroy her. He simply removed himself. And the echo of that absence was total.